In April 1994, the most experienced cave diver who had ever lived descended into a flooded sinkhole in Mexico and did not come back. 6 months later, on the other side of the world, a 20-year-old diver descended into a flooded sinkhole in South Africa and did not come back either. The two men never met. Their caves were thousands of miles apart. What connects them is not geography or circumstance. What connects them is the year, and what the year set in motion. Because one of those men stayed at the bottom of his cave for 10 years, and the attempt to bring him back cost a third life. This is the story of all three. Every safety rule that cave divers follow today was written by one man. His name was Sheck Exley, and by the time he died, he had completed more than 4,000 cave dives, a number that was not just a record, but a category of its own. Nobody else was in the same range. He had been diving Florida's underwater cave systems since the 1960s, pushing into passages that nobody had entered before, and he had watched over those decades as the sport killed people around him in patterns that were consistent enough to be preventable. The deaths were not random. They followed a logic. Divers who entered without guidelines got lost and ran out of air. Divers who miscalculated their gas supplies ran out of air. Divers who went alone when something went wrong had no one. The caves were not making arbitrary choices. They were exploiting specific failures, the same specific failures over and over. Exley cataloged them. He studied the incidents, found the patterns, and in 1970, he wrote a document that became the foundational text of cave diving safety. The rules were not complicated. Use a guideline. Manage your gas in thirds: 1/3 in, 1/3 out, 1/3 in reserve. Never dive alone. Never exceed your training. Know what you're getting into before you get into it. Simple rules. The kind that look obvious after someone has already done the work of extracting them from a pattern of deaths. Those rules saved an incalculable number of lives over the decades that followed. They are still the rules today. Every diver who has entered an underwater cave system since 1970 and come back out has, in some form, benefited from what Sheck Exley put on paper. He also, in those same decades, kept diving. Exley did not stop at cataloging the acceptable limits of the sport. He was drawn to the outer edge of what was survivable, to depth records in flooded caves, to the specific kind of problem-solving that extreme depth in enclosed spaces demands. He held multiple world records for depth in underwater cave systems. He survived dives that, reviewed afterward, should not have been survivable. He had a quality that the best extreme divers tend to have: not recklessness, but a refined capacity to stay functional at the point where most people's ability to think clearly begins to deteriorate. By 1994, Sheck Exley was 45 years old, and the depth record he wanted was 1,000 feet. El Zacatón sits in the state of Tamaulipas in northeastern Mexico, on a cattle ranch called the Hacienda Aldama. It is, on the surface, a beautiful thing. A roughly circular flooded sinkhole about 115 meters across. Its water an unusual pale turquoise near the surface from the dissolved minerals that the hydrothermal system below it produces. It looks, to someone standing at the edge, like something a photographer arranged. What it looks like underground is different. Zacatón is the deepest known flooded sinkhole in the world. Its bottom has been reached only by remote equipment, not by a diver. Not as of 1994 when Exley arrived there. Sonar surveys at the time suggested a depth in excess of 300 meters. The walls descend steeply from the surface, narrowing slightly as they go, the water darkening from turquoise to a color that has no name, and then to nothing. The thermal layer at depth, where geothermally heated water meets the colder water above it, creates a visual distortion, a shimmer in the visibility that makes distance judgment unreliable. Exley came to Zacatón with a dive partner named Jim Bowden, an American technical diver of significant experience. The plan was for both men to descend simultaneously, on parallel ropes, each attempting to reach 1,000 feet 305 meters in what would be the deepest cave dive ever recorded by a human being. On April 6, 1994, both men entered the water. Jim Bowden reached 925 feet, 282 meters. It remains one of the deepest cave dives ever completed by a human. He described the ascent as the most physically and cognitively demanding experience of his life. He made it back to the surface. He came back alone. Sheck Exley did not return on schedule. Bowden waited. Other divers in the support team waited. Exley's line was still in the water. The surface of Zacatón told them nothing. Recovery divers went in. They followed Exley's line downward into the Cenote. They went as deep as safety allowed. They did not find him. Sheck Exley, the man who had dived more underwater caves than any person in history, who had written the rules that told other divers how to come home, did not come home from Zacatón. His body was never recovered. The cenote that sits on a cattle ranch in Tamaulipas, with its unusual pale water and its walls that descend past the point where visibility becomes meaningless, still holds him. He was 45 years old. The cave diving community lost its author. The rules he left behind stayed on the page, unchanged, because they did not need changing. They were correct. They remain correct. They are the framework inside which every subsequent technical cave diver, including the ones who came after him and pushed further into depth records using equipment and techniques that improved over the years that followed, still operates. Including the man who, 10 years later, descended into a different cave on a different continent and found something waiting for him at the bottom. 6 months after Sheck Exley disappeared into Zacatón, a 20-year-old South African diver named Deon Dreyer went into a flooded sinkhole called Boesmansgat. They had nothing in common. Exley was one of the most experienced divers in the world. Dreyer was young, relatively new to technical diving, and went too deep. But 1994 kept them both. And the cave that kept Deon Dreyer was not finished with what it had set in motion. Boesmansgat is an Afrikaans word. It translates plainly as Bushman's Hole. It sits in the northern Cape Province of South Africa, near a small town called Danielskuil. The surface around it is flat and dry. The kind of landscape that suggests nothing remarkable lies beneath it. Then there is a hole in the ground. From the surface, Boesmansgat looks like a large flooded sinkhole, roughly 150 meters across, its edges dropping steeply into dark water. What you cannot see from the surface is what the sinkhole becomes below the waterline. The cave narrows as it descends. The walls angle inward, squeezing the water column into an ever tighter shaft. The water changes as you go deeper, colder, darker, visibility narrowing, until at significant depth the world beyond your torch beam becomes invisible within a few meters in any direction. The bottom of Boesmansgat is approximately 283 meters below the surface. To understand what 283 meters means for a diver, you need to understand what depth does to a human body in ways that have nothing to do with drowning. At that depth, the pressure is 28 times what it is at the surface. Nitrogen in the breathing gas behaves like an anesthetic, slowing reactions, impairing judgment in ways that experienced divers can manage but never fully eliminate. There is also a condition called high-pressure nervous syndrome, tremors, visual disturbances, a quality of wrongness in the body that no amount of training fully removes. And the ascent from 283 meters, done safely with the mandatory decompression stops that prevent nitrogen in the blood from expanding into bubbles, as pressure drops takes hours. It is not a place that forgives mistakes. In October 1994, Deon Dreyer was 20 years old and relatively new to technical diving. What happened on the day he died is not fully reconstructed in the public record. What is known is that he descended into Boesmansgat and did not return on schedule. Recovery divers found him at approximately 270 meters depth, well below the safe operational limit for the diving configuration available at the time. The cold at that depth and the pressure above it preserved him. He remained on the cave floor, intact in his dry suit, his equipment still attached. His family had no choice but to leave him there. The depth made recovery impossible. The cave had him, and in October 1994, there was no means of changing that. Boesmansgat kept Deon Dreyer the way caves keep things they take completely, in the dark, in the cold, without ceremony. For 10 years. David Shaw was 50 years old in 2004 and had built a life defined by precision. He was an airline captain for Cathay Pacific, based in Hong Kong. He had taken up technical diving later than most and progressed through it with the same methodical quality he brought to everything else, checking equipment twice, calculating margins carefully, understanding that the difference between a close call and a disaster was almost always preparation. By 2004, he was operating at extreme depth. In October of that year, he descended into Boesmansgat to attempt a world record dive in fresh water. He reached 271 meters. At that depth, in the narrow shaft of the cave, in the near zero visibility beyond his torch, David Shaw found Deon Dreyer. Deon was lying on the cave floor, the way the cave had left him 10 years earlier. Intact, preserved by the cold and the depth. His equipment still on him. Shaw spent only a short time at that depth. The gas mathematics of a 271-meter dive do not allow for an extended stay. He photographed what he had found. He ascended slowly through the decompression stops the dive required. What he carried back to the surface was not just a world record. Shaw contacted the Dreyer family. He told them he had found Deon. He told them where Deon was and what the conditions were, and that he was intact after 10 years. And then he made a promise to bring their son home. The cave diving community's response was not uniform. People who understood what a body recovery at 270 meters actually required said, directly, that it could not be done safely. The depth alone put the operation at the absolute outer edge of what human physiology could withstand. The additional time a recovery would require extended every existing risk. And the mechanics of securing a body in a confined space, at that depth, while managing your own gas and narcosis and the clock there, was no established procedure. Shaw would be writing it as he went. He spent a year planning. He designed a specialized body bag. He calculated every stage of the dive. He identified his dive partner, a British South African technical diver named Don Shirley, who would descend to approximately 100 meters and wait to assist Shaw on the ascent. On January 8, 2005, David Shaw went back into Boesmansgat. He was wearing a helmet camera. The descent went as planned. Shaw reached Deon on schedule, within his gas margins. What happened next unfolded in a way no amount of planning had anticipated. 10 years at 270 meters had changed the body in ways that were difficult to calculate from the surface. As Shaw worked to secure Deon in the body bag, the bag became entangled in Deon's equipment. In the dark, at depth, with narcosis and HPNs both present and the gas supply counting down, Shaw worked to free it. He could not. Don Shirley waited at 100 meters. Shaw was overdue. Shirley descended toward him. He found Shaw on the cave floor. What Shirley did next at a depth where clear thinking requires everything a person has was to make the decision to ascend. Because descending further meant a second death, not a rescue. He ascended slowly through the decompression stops. The ascent nearly killed him regardless. He surfaced in severe physiological distress and spent weeks recovering from what the dive had done to his body. David Shaw did not surface. The helmet camera Shaw had been wearing continued recording after he died. Recovery divers went back into Boesmansgat in the days that followed. They brought Shaw's body out. The camera came with it. The footage was later reviewed and eventually broadcast in a documentary. It showed a man working carefully, then urgently, at 270 meters in the dark, trying to solve a problem that the cave had decided he would not solve.
Right, something seems to be stopping him now. He's caught in the line. Okay. He's working hard trying to untangle himself. You can see the bag. Okay, there he goes. He's moving on again. Now, he's breathing very hard. It's getting quite difficult to do things. Good check on the gauge. Now, Dave's breathing would be getting quite heavy. as he's trying to work his way out. And slowly, Dave would start to become incoherent, and then he would stop.
It showed, at the end, stillness. In the weeks after Shaw's death, something happened that nobody had planned for. Deon Dreyer surfaced. The disturbance Shaw had caused at the cave floor, the movement, the handling, the entanglement, had altered the buoyancy of Deon's body. He rose through the water column and reached the surface of Boesmansgat. David Shaw came out in the arms of recovery divers. Deon Dreyer came out on his own. The cave that had held them both released them, just not in any way that resembled what David Shaw had gone back for.